Yeah, I'll have some of that. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Again, good morning, everybody. Glad to get you to wake up this morning. Not doing any just that to say God thank you. I had plans to say, hope you guys have just the time.
Yes.
Put the flag on the face.
Yeah.
Just want to do a little moment of practice. What do you think is important? What do you think is important? Your mother. Yeah, that's a good thing. What do you think is important?
My entire family.
It's not her family. All right, this mom, what do you think is important?
That's students.
Your students, because the students are one on board. What do you think is important? Your mom.
Just a great time to be talking about how we move forward as a people and how we repair the things that were lost. And I love having these conversations, so I'm grateful. Just grateful to be here.
Very good. Now, let me make you about I want to yield to the student. I always like to encourage the young people who are support the forward. I'm going to bring the to the senior. Jackson University. Taylor is Chief Justice at Langston University. I say, what is it? I guess you don't know why, because you can get rid of the person.
Yes, we can. Greetings, my brothers and sisters. Honors to Dr. Keys. Thank you so much for allowing us to use this space. I would like to welcome you to this sacred ground, not only where bombs were dropped, but where businesses succeeded, where dreams and opportunities were achievable, and where people loved each other. And I also want to welcome you to none other than Langston University, Oklahoma's only HBCU. Currently, Langston University has the highest business college scores in the state of Oklahoma. So, and we also have the #1 retention of graduation rate. After they graduate, they stay in the state of Oklahoma and work in the state of Oklahoma. So welcome to Tulsa as we are creating the strategy and the opportunity for the students when they graduate, they have a place to come and start their business. Let's get to work. I encourage you to mentor a young person and have that young person mentor another young person. Thank you for coming. Thank you for having me. Let's get to work.
It's so proud. Dignitary school stand in recognition. Let's get to work. One of my favorites, Councilwoman, but that's the yellow heart.
Grand risings.
Grand risings.
We're going to get straight to it. I want to introduce, I'm going to read the bio. Can you hear me? I'm going to read the bio. Yes, ma'am.
She stands up and nobody knows who she is.
She is the Secretary of State for the Cherokee Nation. Your sister.
Yeah.
Bio for this young man that's on the screen, Siphiwe Baleka. I met him a couple of years ago in Ghana. I had an opportunity to go on to a retreat in Ghana on reparations and healing. Dr. Dory DeGrew last night mentioned that conference, and so that's where I met my brother. And I call him my brother because he's probably going to talk a little bit about it in his presentation. I had my African ancestry done. And I was able to learn that through on my father's maternal side, that she come from her DNA is with the Balanta tribe in Guinea-Bissau. And that is where he is, in Guinea-Bissau. And he is also a member of the Balanta tribe. Right. And so I believe that's why I call him, that's my brother. And so I want to read his bio, and then he'll get into his presentation, which I've heard, and I've been, ever since he presented, I've been on his, I think he's been on stalking. But the information that he brings as it relates to the transatlantic slave trade was just so eye-opening. And so I felt that it was necessary to hear this information to ground us in why we're here and what we're doing in the space of repair and reparations. Siphiwe Baleka is a former world-class swimmer and Yale graduate who has now become a leading strategist and advocate for global African reparatory justice. For more than 2 decades, he has been involved with developing the African diaspora as the 6th region of the African Union and invoking Afro-descendants' right to return and citizenship in their ancestral homelands on the African continent. Recently, he has led a campaign requesting an advisory opinion from the International Court of Justice on the fundamental legal questions concerning our reparations claim centered on the Dum Diversas of Apostolic Edict. Dum Diversas Apostolic Edict, declaring total war on African people. Siphiwe Baleka served as the former Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Provisional Government of the Republic of New Africa, the former head of the Communications Commission of the Pan-African Federalist Movement, and president of the Balanta Bureau, I'm mispronounce this, Burasa History and Genealogy Society in America, which has succeeded in securing citizenship in Guinea-Bissau for its members and Afro-descendants of Guinea-Bissau origin. I'm going to be working on that. He is now recognized by governments and the African Commission on Human and People's Rights as an Afro-descendant reparations expert. Wow. And so take it away, my brother.
Abene, that means thank you. Abene binyam neyo wule. Thank you, wise ancestors of the past. Abene sof da Vanessa. Thank you, my sister Vanessa, for inviting me once again. I really appreciate and feel honored to have this platform and to be at the only HBCU in Oklahoma, if I heard that correctly. My understanding is I'm going to have till a little bit after the top of the hour for this first part. And then after a break, there will be a breakout session for those that want to go deeper. Okay. So to begin with, first of all, okay, imagine you wanted to make orange juice. So you get a bunch of apples, you put them in a blender, you press the button, and then afterward, you get the juice, you drink it, and you're like, this isn't orange juice, this isn't what I want. And suppose you go and you spend all your time trying to play with the different buttons on the blender, you take apart the motor of the blender, you clean the blender bowl, you spend all your time focusing on the blender, trying to get what you want. But as you know, if you don't go to the origin of the problem was you wanted orange juice, but you started with apples. So you will never get what you want if you don't go to the origin of the problem. And this is what we're going to do in this first part of the session. If we're going to talk about reparations for Afro-descendant people, Afro-descendant means your ancestor was taken against their will from their homeland, from their family, from their village, trafficked against their will across the Atlantic, and enslaved in the Americas. If we want to talk about reparations for Afro-descendant people, whether it's North America, South America, Central America, the Caribbean, we have to start at the origin. And sadly, as Carter G. Woodson taught us, most of us have been miseducated. We have never actually been taught the origin, how what we refer to as the transatlantic enslavement or trade started. We're going to go over that today. And then after, we're going to discuss the legal ramifications. They can be of great use to the reparations movement right there in Tulsa. Okay? Now, by a show of hands, how many people in the room are Afro-descendants? Raise your hands. You had an ancestor that was enslaved in the Americas. All right, keep your hands up. Now watch this. Keep your hand up if you can tell me, right, tell me the people that either your maternal or paternal lineage came from in Africa or the language they spoke. Okay, if you know where or who they came from in Africa and what language they spoke, what we call mother tongue, keep your hand up. Okay, good. I see a few people with their hands up. If we were to have all 50 million African Americans in the room, it would only be, you can put your hands down now, it would only be a small percentage that could answer that question. If you haven't taken the African Ancestry DNA test, or by some great oral history keeping in your family, more than 90% of us, more than 95%, probably about 99% of us, no longer can identify who we come from or our mother tongue. And that is where reparation starts. Because someone was taken from their family, from their village, from their culture, from their mother tongue, brought to the Americas, and through a violent manufacturing process, right, destroyed that identity. There's a word for that. It's called ethnocide. And if you can't identify those people, that mother tongue, that means you continue to suffer from that original crime today, which makes it an ongoing harm that requires reparations. Okay? Now, Vanessa, were you able to print out the handout that you had? Okay, so people have the handout. You have a diagram. It says the poison tree, right? And it says the legal doctrine, right? The fruit of the poisonous tree rule states that if the source of a legal action is illegal, everything that follows is also invalid or illegal. A criminal foundation cannot support a lawful structure. So what we're going to do right now is I'm going to, as quickly as I can, go over what is called the poisoned root. All of this, how all of this started, and why it's important that everyone in the room, everyone in Oklahoma, everyone in the United States, everyone in the Americas, everyone in the world has to know the truth in order for us to move forward. So let me share my screen. Share screen. Here we go. All right. So let us start by looking at before the original crime, before the very first slave ship or military ship arrived in Africa, what was going on, especially in Europe. So we need to understand that from the 8th to the 11th century, there was a slave trade going on. So 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, for 5 centuries before our ancestors were invaded and attacked, there was a slave trade going on, and you can see it's going on in Europe. And you can see, right, that people were taken out of Africa through the Iberian Peninsula over here where Spain and Portugal is. And they were also taken out through what we call Egypt, okay, and taken through this route. At this time, there was a war going on between Christians and Muslims that engulfed the entire Mediterranean, Europe, North Africa, what we call the Middle East, okay? So at this time, there's already slavery. Now, let me show you this real quick. All right. Just so we can fully understand, this is from the ancient Middle Kingdom of Egypt, right? More than 10 centuries before what I was just talking about. That shows people, different colors, they come from different geographical locations, all taken as prisoners of war and forced to work, labor, sometimes in the military, sometimes in other efforts. So this practice of capturing people and enslaving them was going on for a long time before what we're going to talk about, how our ancestors arrived in the Americas. Okay? By the time we get to 1243 AD, Pope Innocent IV asked the question, is it licit, is it legal to invade the lands that infidels, right, people who are non-Christians, is it legal to invade the lands that they possess? And if it is legal, why? His answer was, there existed a temporal domain that was simultaneously autonomous yet subordinate. In spiritual matters, the Pope's authority prevailed, according to the Pope, according to the Catholic Church, since, according to their doctrine, all humans were of Christ, though not with the Church. This resulted in a jurisdiction over two distinct flocks. This is the European Christian mind thinking back in 1243. That there was a jurisdiction consisting of Christians and one consisting of everyone else. So if you're not Christian, you're part of what they call the extra ecclesiam. Since the Pope's jurisdiction extended de jure, according to rightful entitlement or by claim, over the infidels or non-Christians, he, the Pope alone, could call for a Christian invasion of an infidel or non-Christian domain. Okay, to discard Christianity would mean that their dominion merely rested on the might of one particular lineage over another. What all of this means is that, according to European Christian thinking at this time, 1243, there had to be a just cause in order to go into non-Christian lands and invade them. And only the Pope could say if there was just cause or not. All right. Now, in Europe, at this time, just before they start coming to West Africa, first there's the Great Famine of 1315 to 1317. It is estimated to have killed 30% to 60% of the European population. Then there was the white hygiene death. It was a bubonic plague pandemic that occurred in Europe from 1346 to 1353. It was one of the most fatal pandemics in human history. As many as 50 million people perished, perhaps 50% of Europe's 14th century population. Okay, how many people knew that? How many people were taught that the condition of Europe was pitiful, that their people were dying just before they came into Africa? Okay. At the same time, Mansa Musa had acquired a reputation, a European reputation, as the result of a spectacular pilgrimage to Mecca in 1324, when he dazzled Cairo with its prodigious display of wealth and especially gold. So while Europe's population is decreasing, they're suffering poor hygiene, they're having plagues, right? They're dying of famine and poor hygiene. Their idea of Africa is, wow, these people, they're rich, they have splendor, they have gold. Mansa Musa came from here, and he traveled this route across Africa, across North Africa to Cairo, eventually went to Mecca with gold and guess what? Slaves. Now, at that time, there were already these trade routes in the Mediterranean. So it's not like European people were ignorant about Africa, its state, its condition. Okay? There was a lot of knowledge on both sides. And meanwhile, they are already trading slaves. White slaves, European slaves, Middle Eastern slaves. It's mostly Christians enslaving Moors, Moors enslaving Christians, Christians enslaving Muslims, Muslims enslaving Christians, and both of them going into what we call Guinea, sub-Saharan Africa, where we were neither Christian nor Muslim. We had nothing to do with those foreign religions. And they would come and capture people and bring them on these trade routes, right? And bring them to the Mediterranean, okay? Now, by 1447, there's a book written by Antonius Malfante. He talks about on horseback going southward for 12 days to a place called the Tuat, right here. It's ruled by an oligarchy. Merchants enjoy very great security. There are many Jews who lead a good life here, for they are under the protection of the several rulers, each of whom defends his clients. Trade is in their hands. This locality is a mart of the country of the Moors. Gold is carried hither and brought by those who come up from the coast. This place is Tamenti, okay? So you have Tuat, you have all the way from North Africa, you're coming down, they come all the way down as far as here, okay? The gold fields are south of here, okay? There are many rich men here. In the lands of the blacks as well as here dwell the Philistines, the Tuareg, those are North Africans, who live like the Arabs in tents. They are without number and hold sway over the land. Great warriors, these people are continually at war amongst themselves. The states which are under their rule border upon the land of the blacks. So we're talking about non-black people. We're talking about brown people who are an admixture of North Africans and Europe's. We're talking about Arab people, and we're talking about European people, all traveling these trade routes, going into the land where our black ancestors lived, who had nothing to do with this. Okay? There are a small number of whites, Tawny Moors in Takeda. Takeda is right here. Look how far south that is. Okay? All of them in these great empires of Gao, Timbuktu, Guinea, which is where Guinea comes from, and Mali. All these are great cities, capitals of extensive lands and towns under their rule. These adhere to the law of Muhammad. So let's get it straight, okay? At this time in Europe, just before they start coming to the West Coast, there was already contact. In fact, they had already started taking slaves into Europe, right? They had Moorish slaves, they had Guinean slaves, they had Slavic, white European slaves that were living in Portugal and Spain and other places in the Mediterranean, okay? It's not like they told us, oh, one day they decided to go in boats and explore the ocean, and they just ended up on the west coast of Africa, and to their surprise, they found people living in huts and took them. No, they knew we had great cities. They knew about Mansa Musa. They knew that, yeah, we had villages and lived in huts, but we also had great cities, all right? Now, watch this. In 1415, the King of Portugal's brother, Prince Henry, decides to capture this city called Ceuta, which controls the trade in the Mediterranean. When Prince Henry conquers this city in 1415, he learns about all that I just told you about. He learns that if you go south past the desert, there is a lot of gold, and also there are slaves. Okay. He learns about these trade routes. Now, if you look right here, the green, those are donkey and porter routes, okay? These are easy to traverse. But crossing the Sahara, only the camels could do that. And so those Tuaregs, those Moors, those mixed breed, part Arab, part Black, part European people, right, were controlling that trade, right? And these were the different capitals of that. Here you can see the gold. This is where the gold is. And they were trading salt and other things. All right. In 1420, Prince Henry gained appointment as the governor of the Military Order of Christ, the Portuguese successor to the Knights Templars, which had its headquarters at Tomar in central Portugal. Those of you who know the history of the Crusades, when you had the Christians fighting the Muslims from about the 10th century to the 13th century, right? During that period, traveling from Western Europe to the Ottoman Empire in the Middle East, you had pilgrims, but they also had to move money. And in order to protect the pilgrims and the money, they developed a system of knights and orders that were part religious orders, part military orders. The most famous became Knights Templars. They were the ones that moved the gold and the silver and the money from place to place and established the modern banking system that we know of today. The Knights Templars were replaced by the Military Order of Jesus Christ, headquartered in Tomar, Portugal. Okay. By 1433, there's an apostolic edict. The Pope gives a decree. It's called the Romanus Pontifex. It's the first in a series of papal bulls issued during the 15th century that regulated Christian expansion. The purpose was for Prince Henry to go on purpose with his men at arms to those lands that are held by them and guide his army against them. This is not a benign commercial trading venture. These are armies, armed people, intended to make war under the banner of the said order against Moors and other enemies of the faith, to take the exclusive jurisdiction over Guinea, a land that did not belong to them, that was occupied by our ancestors. Infant Henrique invoked the rhetoric of a just war so as to solicit the papal patronage. Okay? By 1434, the Portuguese had gradually distinguished Africa, meaning North Africa above the Sahara, from Guinea, the land of the blacks below the Sahara. In contrast to the land of the Moors, Guinea, the land of the blacks, represented the more fertile region. Eventually, the Portuguese rendered geographical dissimilarities into customary and ultimately juridical distinctions, separating Moors from blackamoors. So they said, depending on where you live and what you look like, you belong to this jurisdiction or that jurisdiction. And because the Pope says that he is the representative of Jesus Christ on earth, therefore he has the dominion and he has jurisdiction over all jurisdictions because he says so.
Wow.
Now watch this, okay? The funds appropriated from that military order of Jesus Christ located in Tomar, Portugal, largely financed the first Atlantic voyages along the western coast of Africa that Henry began to promote in the mid-1420s because he learned about it when he captured this city right here, Ceuta. When he captured that city, he learned all the information about what was going on down here. So you can see 1418, they get this far, they get this far. They get this far by 1443. They get this far, 1445. They get to our Balanta homeland. That's my homeland, Vanessa's homeland. I understand my brother Cam Howard is in the audience. He's Balanta. They get to our homeland between 1446 and 1456. Not because they were out willy-nilly exploring and just trying to sail the ocean to see what is out there. No, these are military expeditions designed to what? Find the gold and the source of the slaves. It was all financed by this military order of Jesus Christ because the Pope said so. Now, I'm going to skip this part. We're going to go here. During these voyages, Portuguese King Dom Afonso V, right, commissioned, right, Gomes Azarara to write the chronicle of the discovery and conquest of Guinea. So a royal historian is sent on these expeditions to make a firsthand eyewitness account of what happens. Okay? And he writes that one of the ship commanders brought with him an armed caravel intent on capturing some of the people of this country. By their own eyewitness accounts, this is not a trade mission. This is a military expedition. Okay? After they took their first prisoners, they traded and took an additional 10 prisoners. Gonzalez exchanged his 2 captives that were Moors for 10 blacks, male and female, from various countries. Though the Portuguese captured both Moors and the Black Moors, they had already started distinguishing between sovereign Moorish subjects and those Moors, Negroes, and blacks that they could legitimately enslave. The Portuguese introduced a taxonomy that distinguished Moors from blackamoors, infidels from pagans, and Africans from blacks, sovereign from sovereignless subjects, free persons from slaves. Okay? Here is Gomes Azarara's account of the Portuguese first arrival in the land of Guinea. Now these caravels, these armed military ships, having passed by the land of Sahara, as hath been said, came in sight of the 2 palm trees that Dinis Diaz had met with before, by which they understood that they were at the beginning of the land of the Negroes. Now the people of this green land are wholly black, and hence this is called the land of the Negroes, or land of Guinea, whereas also the men and women thereof are called Guineas, as if we're to say black men. And as soon as they reached the land, Stefan Afonso leapt out and 5 others with him, and they proceeded in the manner that the others had suggested. And while they were going thus concealed, even until they neared the hut, they saw come out of it a Negro boy, stark naked, with a spear in his hand. Him they seized at once, and coming up close to this hut, they lighted upon a girl, his sister, who was about 8 years old. Right then and there, by their own eyewitness account, by the royal historian of Portugal, writing for the military order of Jesus Christ, the first contact, they kidnap a boy and a girl. In the name of their God, Jesus Christ. Because the Pope said it was legal to do so. Okay? By 1446, 55 caravels, military ships, had voyaged down the west coast. Okay? 55 different military expeditions. Okay? In order that these ships might have some cargo on their outward voyage. They bargained in such a way that he had 51 guineas brought to the caravel in exchange for whom 18 Moors were given. So these Portuguese, they would capture the Moors. The Moors would say, wait, right? If you let us go free, we'll give you some guineas. For everyone that you let free, we'll give you 5, 10 black guineas. That's how this thing started. Finally, okay, I'm going to skip this. I want to get to this and then we'll pause and take a break. On June 18, 1452, Pope Nicholas V issued the Dum Diversas, declaring total war against the people in the land of Guinea. The document stated, "We grant to you full and free power through the apostolic authority by this edict to invade, conquer, fight, subjugate the Saracens." That was a word that they used back then to mean people of the Muslim faith, and pagans. That was the word they used to mean anybody who's not Christian, and other infidels and other enemies of Christ. And wherever there are established their kingdoms, their duchies, their royal palaces, their principalities, their cities, their dominions, their lands, their places, their estates, their camps, and any other possession, mobile and immobile, all the goods that you can find there. Okay? All of these, right? We grant possessions of the king or prince of these of the kings or princes, and to lead their persons, their people, in perpetual servitude, and to appropriate their realms, duchies, royal palaces, principalities, and other dominions, possessions, and goods of this kind to you and your use and your successors, the kings of Portugal. Literally, this document is a declaration of war, not a declaration of trade. It says to invade, conquer, fight, subjugate, take all their possessions, mobile and immovable. That means the stuff that's under the ground. When you see resource extraction in Africa today, when they take the lithium, the cobalt, all those things in the ground, these resource wars, it is because of this degree still. We give you the authority to go and take it. Perpetual servitude, meaning this is never to end. Finally, okay, I'm going to skip this because it's available. You can all read it. I'm going to skip this. I just want to get to the part. These are the ships that came. Okay, you have this. This is the last part, then we'll stop for a break. The Dum Diversas Apostolic Edict was followed up with monopoly war contracts known as asientos that were variously granted by the Catholic Church to private merchants from 1518 to 1595, to Portugal again from 1595 to 1640, to the Genoese, those are the Italians, from 1662 to 1671, to the Dutch and the Portuguese from 1671 to 1701, to France from 1701 to 1713, to the British, which included her 13 colonies in America from 1713 to 1750, and finally to the Spanish from 1765 to 1779. What these contracts said was that whoever held the contract had the exclusive right to engage in the war trafficking of prisoners of war. And whoever held the contract, the profits from this trafficking, whatever you can take, gold, salt, ebony, people, 50% had to go to the Catholic Church, and the country holding the contract could keep the other 50%, which means that throughout the entire time, the single largest profiteer of this war is the Catholic Church, because regardless of who held the contract, they always got 50% of the profit. The United States officially entered the Dum Diversas War when New Hampshire became the 9th of 13 British colonies to ratify the United States Constitution, which prohibited Congress from outlawing the trafficking of African prisoners of war for 20 years. The Constitution literally said, we will engage in this war for 20 years, and then we will abolish it. Okay? This is what they didn't tell us. This is how the whole thing started. That means every African that captured was a prisoner of this Dum Diversas war. Let's stop right there, right? Because it's a little bit after the top of the hour. See if we have any comments, questions, reactions. How do you feel about this information, right? And then we can go into some other aspects when we have the breakout for those that want to get more into this.
Any questions, comments?
Let me ask a question now. Okay, so the Dum Diversas is the legal edict that allowed for European countries to take over Africa.
Hold on. Can you hear him?
I can hear them, yes.
To take over African villages and jurisdictions. And so was the inter cartera the edict that gave them the European nations jurisdiction over all the lands west of the Azores Mountain, the Azores Island, and everything that was to the west, right?
Okay, so the inter cartera was what year?
1493.
1493. So, in terms of reparations and our reparation struggle, right? Everything that follows the Dum Diversas 1452, which is a declaration of war, but it's an illegal war. Because remember, right, prior to that, previous popes say you can't invade, right, these infidel lands unless you have a just cause. Now, the inter cartera, everything that comes after the Dum Diversas is what we call bad fruit. So whatever it says, yeah, okay, yeah, it gives them jurisdiction, whatever. But all of that is still illegal bad fruit. The thing that I'm trying to get the entire world, but particularly the reparations movement, to understand is, in that document, by saying take everything, take all their possessions, all their lands, that document does not distinguish between combatants and civilians. That means that according to universal law back then and international law today, that is a special category of war called total warfare. Total warfare is agreed to be so egregious, such a great violation of right and wrong, of natural order, of divine dignity granted to human beings, that there's no statute of limitations on it, ever. It doesn't matter if it was 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago. And this is why switching our narrative from seeking reparations for slavery and changing it to seeking reparations for war damage and continuing harm from a war that has never ceased. When we get to Tulsa and what happened in Tulsa, that is just one incident in an ongoing war that is taking place from as far north as Greenland to as far south as Argentina. It's one legal event spanning 5 centuries. Now, I don't know if I answered your question. You can go back and read the decree you're talking about to see exactly what it says. You can go back and read that. But I want to ask this. For example, what happened in Tulsa? Tulsa is in what county?
Tulsa County.
Tulsa County. All right. So what happened to our people was not just a matter for Tulsa County, it's also a matter for the state of Oklahoma, isn't it?
Yes.
All right. So if it's a matter for the state of Oklahoma, then it's also a matter of the United States, isn't it? And if it's a matter of the United States, it's also a matter of the international order, isn't it? Now, let me ask you, how has the reparations movement there engaged in the international arena? How have you sought to bring your case before the International Court of Justice? The answer might be you haven't. I don't know.
Can't tell you not all that's what they do. Right?
In regards to specifically to Tulsa, we have to raise it through a established body within the United States that we asserted that we are. He was going to go into that. I think that's what he's going with that.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is what we can talk about in the next session, but basically, you don't have to go through the United States. You are not subject to United States law and jurisdiction as human beings. Now, yes, there is the problem of standing before the International Court of Justice. Okay, but there are ways to go about bringing your claims and being able to say, look, it's the fruit of the bad tree. If our ancestors were brought and ended up in Tulsa by means of an illegal declaration of total warfare, then making us citizens under the 14th Amendment is bad fruit. Means we're not subject to the United States law. We can make this case, for example, to the African Court, the African Commission on Human Rights, to states like Ghana and say, look, right, people were taken from Ghana, ended up in Tulsa. These things violated their rights. We're seeking war damage. Since these are, just like, for example, Kama and I and Vanessa and I are Balanta, we could appeal to Guinea-Bissau to say, look, we were taken from territories now claimed by Guinea-Bissau. Our rights are still being violated. We need you to bring our case before the International Court of Justice or before the African Court. So all I wanted to get at was that in the same way, you didn't just limit your case to the city of Tulsa trying to get reparations from them, just like you didn't limit your case to the county of Tulsa, or just like you didn't limit your case to the state of Oklahoma, and you brought it to, you're trying to bring it to federal. You don't have to limit it to federal either, right? I would suggest that you argue you have exhausted, right, domestic remedies, and that the United States has shown itself unwilling or incapable of protecting your internationally civic and political rights under the ICCPR, which the United States is signatory to, which says you have a right to your mother tongue, which most of you don't know. You have a right to decide your political destiny. You have a right to reparations for war damage. But if you were never taught about these international instruments that the United States is a signatory to, and you don't understand your rights under them, how would you know to pursue them, right? So we can talk more about that or other aspects of the presentation, but it's, I know we're scheduled to take a break and I want to respect the time. I see a hand up if there was another question or two for this part.
Yeah, I had a question. If you were a victim of a war crime and you're a prisoner of war, what is the remedies that, you know, in the international scope that can be given to you? I mean, like, okay, we've established that we are victims. That's
okay.
Established and corroborated by the UN. But now, what happens next?
Great question. Let me answer the second question first. The remedies, first of all, the law that governs this is a treaty. It's called the Geneva Convention. The Geneva Convention says that you retain the status as prisoner of war until your final release and repatriation. So, since all of you are there and you're not in your ancestral homeland, you have not been repatriated, nor were you asked. So by virtue of that, you can claim the status of prisoner of war. Now, what does the Geneva Convention mean by final release? That is a more challenging question. At the moment of emancipation, okay, our ancestors were no longer chattel property of their former slave owners. However, they had no status in American society. For 3 years before the 14th Amendment, they were not citizens. You were emancipated free beings on alien territory by virtue of a crime. As a free being, At that moment, what should have happened was a plebiscite. The United States government had the burden of going to all the newly emancipated free beings who are now a class of people never before contemplated in law. The Constitution never contemplated this before. There's no law for this. There's no precedent for this. They were supposed to go to you and ask you, do you want to return from where you came from? Do you want to stay and integrate and live amongst us? Do you want to establish self-governing colonies of your own? Or do you want to go somewhere else? That is what was supposed to happen. Now, actually, the Lincoln administration, they didn't conduct a plebiscite, but what they did was they invited 20 representatives of the newly freed people to meet in Savannah, Georgia, and basically asked them this question. 19 of the 20 representatives said, we want land of our own for self-governing colonies to develop on our own, so that we could eventually become our own nation, independent people, govern ourselves. The Lincoln administration recognized all 4 of those options. The Lincoln administration granted set-aside land for our settlement. One land was in the Carolinas, the other was in Davis Bend, Mississippi. 72,000 people settled in the Davis Bend, Mississippi territory, and it became a self-governing colony that outperformed the plantations in the South. The Lincoln administration also recognized your right to return. They set aside $500,000 for that. They would give $100 to any person who wanted to voluntarily return to Africa. At the time, they didn't have DNA testing and they couldn't tell you exactly where, but they were setting up colonies in Liberia and a few other places. And if you wanted, they would pay for it. They set aside $100 for each person plus another $500,000, right, to pay for the program. They also recognized your right to integrate and assimilate if you want, which is how they led to the 14th Amendment. And they also recognized your right to go somewhere else. They started negotiating with Haiti because Haiti was what? A group of slaves that liberated themselves, set up their own government, and people wanted to go there. They didn't want to go back to Africa, but they wanted to go to places like Haiti or places where they maybe some of them came from Barbados to the Carolinas. And so the Lincoln administration recognized all 4 of our rights under international law. And then Lincoln was assassinated. There was a coup in America. The next administration took over, got rid of all of that, and said, the only option you have is to be forcibly assimilated into America. So there's a precedent in United States history and law that recognized us as prisoners of war with these rights. Now, to your first question, what needs to happen now is these fundamental, Mario Bedelli, president of the Republic of New Africa in 1973, presented these questions to the United States government. The United States government's response was, these are questions that we, as a domestic jurisdiction, cannot answer because they can only be settled by universal or international law. The United States cannot determine our rights under international law. Only international rights can do that. So the United States defers and literally says, we can't tell you if we have properly converted you into citizens or not. There's a case from 1973 that they never tell you about. So what has to happen now, this is the answer to your first question. We are supposed to present these questions, the fundamental legal questions, and request an advisory opinion from the International Court of Justice to settle it once and for all. This is the campaign that I lead. Did that answer your question?
Another question? What? Oh.
I have a question.
Okay, speak. Yeah.
Yeah, so I am Roman Catholic and I love my Catholic church. My mom was a Native American, 100% Chippewa from Canada. My dad is from Belize, Central America. He's of African descent.
My mom got taken from her home at age 5 and went to a Catholic boarding school where she was not allowed to practice her culture. So she had very hurtful feelings toward the Catholic Church. But toward the end of her life, 4 years ago, she evolved through education and whatever to love her Catholic Church. And I kind of feel your heart, sir. Seems like your heart is in the right place. Seems like you're very educated and knowledgeable. From my hearing your presentation so far, you seem to, the Catholic Church seems to be the #1 villain in your presentation. I know that Pope Leo was visiting your area last week, Pope Leo. And my question is, I'm trying to formulate some type of question for you.
Struggling, I think.
Is, where does the Catholic Church play today in 2026? Do they have to apologize? What's their status now?
Yeah, may I speak to that? In 2008, the under is what the apology is, where the Pope at that time recanted all of the doctrines against the peoples of the indigenous lands. So it's called the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. And a lot of indigenous natives, indigenous people around the world are using this doctrine, reclaim lands, entitled conditions and status, as to your point of what the Catholic Church has done. Because for the most part, Catholics run the money systems in all societies. And so to make recompense, I suppose, this is what it was the result of the Catholic Church being sorry for, the Dum Diversas, the Etiquette, all the papal bulls that have been, all the edicts that the folks have issued and declaring war on melanated people around the world. It's a secret war that no one knows about. So I think that the only thing that I think that the Catholic Church could do is to spread awareness of this document and letting the people of the world know that, hey, this is what has happened, because don't like to take blame. Because when you take blame, that means that you have to suffer the consequences of maybe something that you didn't do, but you still get the rewards of it. And so you want to be indifferent because you don't want to take action over here, because if you do take action, then you have to take the brunt of all of it, versus not taking action at all and letting you continue to get not get the punishment. So I just wanted to mention that to your point. I came in on the end of that about, the Catholic Church being, because I'm of the mindset that if you just watch all of the policies that are passed, especially in the United States, because I made mention of intercontinental, because if you look at how our government's formed, how the jurisdictions form, even John Marshall, Chief Justice John Marshall, used intercontinental to take lands from Indian people in a case. So this has been cited in the Constitution. If you look at the last article, so like this is integrated in every facet of melanated people's lives, not just the United States, here in America, but around the world. So using the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, to your point, I believe is what the remedy is, that the Pope at that time, back in 2008, President Obama was aware of this. This is what they come up with, but it's just not known. So spreading awareness would be the best thing I think that the Catholic Church should do. This is my personal.
I see that there's a lot of hands up, but it's real critical at this point for me to say something. First of all, the Catholic Church has not rescinded any of those apostolic edicts. The only thing the Catholic Church repudiated was what is called the doctrine of discovery. Second of all, the indigenous people are a different class than us because they didn't lose, they weren't taken from their identity. They were able to retain their mother tongue. And when they use indigenous people, is referring mostly to the peoples that they found in the Americas. This is the very reason why the United Nations has a permanent forum on indigenous people, and it was inadequate to cover our status, which is why they created the United Nations Permanent Forum on People of African Descent. So the things that the Catholic Church has done with taking steps towards the indigenous people do not fit us. What the Catholic Church can do now and what is responsible now, it's not apologies that is needed. What is needed is, now that we have the technology to repair the ethnocide, the Catholic Church has to be the lead in saying, because of what we did, we will now offer to you free. Anybody who wants to take the African Ancestry DNA test to find out who they come from in Africa, to restore their dignity, their identity, their natural God-given identity. That's the response. We don't want just an apology, because if somebody steals your car and then they come to you and they say, hey, I'm sorry I stole your car, but every day they're still driving your car. Okay, the Catholic Church is responsible. And finally, I know this is hard for Christians, especially Catholics, to hear. I understand that is what we call cognitive dissonance. Separate your personal faith in theology, right, from the Vatican as an institution. They don't have to mess with your faith or ideology, but if you know that your church is responsible for this, you should be working within your church to say, look, in order for this church to be right with God, you got to provide the remedy and the repair the damage that you did. So you don't have to leave your church, fight for reparations from within the church.
And brothers, they got the money to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, off our backs. Okay.
Thank you again, sir. We appreciate it, and thanks for staying up.
Too, so when we do the breakout session.
Let me let them know, Vanessa.
Oh, okay.
I appreciate it. Vanessa running everything, yeah? You know I love them. You know I love them. Their breakout session will be in room 116 and it starts at 2:30. So make sure you show up. Again, we appreciate you for staying up. One more round of applause. We appreciate it. I appreciate it as well. At this time, I met this lady today, actually, and she was just a ball of fire. Yeah. Just enjoy, have this little swag about it when she walks in. It's like, that's my mom. It's like.
Yes, we've done her. We have another year.
Oh,
Yes.
Siphiwe,
Yes.
she already wanted to let you know that that there's a Yelly in the room.
Ah, my condolences. My Yale experience was bittersweet, but that's a class for another time. I can tell you what it's like to go to Yale University and become politically and spiritually conscious at such an institution, and the crisis of identity and conscience that provoked, which led me to what I'm doing now. But that's a conversation for another time. Now, about how much time do we have for this breakout session?
An hour?
An hour. Okay, great. I didn't have the benefit of hearing the other presentations since I made mine, I know that there was probably a lot of great information. So I'm not quite sure where we are in terms of the room. But what I'd like to do first off, before I start, was there any burning comment or question from my first presentation earlier? Anything in specific that I need to address before I sort of switch gears on what I think it is that you need to know?
Everybody? Okay, hit it.
Okay. So one of the things that I'd like to do now is help us with what I call the sovereign mind switch. Okay. In order for the reparations movement to go forward, we have to have some kind of mental switch. And what I'm talking about is before our ancestors were trafficked across the Atlantic and brought to the Americas and ended up in Tulsa, Oklahoma, we came from territories that had their own sovereign legal jurisdiction. And if we don't reclaim that and proceed from that point, we are stuck in a foreign jurisdiction that is not designed to provide us with justice. Most of us, all we know is what is called Anglo-Saxon positive law, meaning our experience in America has taught us that there's a legal system. It has written laws, it has procedure, it has precedents, and that carries a legal or jurisdictional weight or importance that is superior to what we had before their arrival. One of the reasons why this is a problem is because if we came from societies that were highly organized but used different systems of recording, then when they present their positive law, their statutes, their precedent, their case law, and we present, for example, our ritual, they say, oh, that's just belief, it's just religion, it's just, it doesn't carry the weight of law. So what I'm about to show you will change that forever, okay? And then once you internalize this, you will never proceed within the United States legal jurisdiction ever again. You will realize that there is what is called the conflict of laws, and that you must assert your own legal jurisdiction. But before we get to that, let me share my screen and show you exactly what I'm talking about. Okay? All right. And let me go to hopefully you can see my screen. All right, so this is what I call framing the spiritual tort committed by the Vatican against the Balanta. But this is true of all the African people, not just Balanta, it's all of them, okay? It's basically indigenous African law versus Western law. So I ask the question, how do I make the argument that Balanta or any African ancestral ritual or spirituality constituted a natural legal system that the Vatican and Portuguese violated? I asked this of ancestral intelligence, AI, and it responded. To argue that Balanto or any traditional African people's spirituality and rituals constitute a natural legal system, you must move the conversation away from religion and toward jurisprudence. In this framework, the rituals are not just ceremonies, they are statutes and constitutions that govern the indigenous social order. Now, I'm going to use Balanta as an example because that's what I know best and that's what I have studied. But this is a case study for wherever your ancestor that survived the Middle Passage, that bore children and grandchildren, who eventually ended up in Tulsa. This is true for them, which means it's true for you too. Watch this. First step. Define natural law via your indigenous cosmology. In European legal philosophy, natural law is a system of right or justice that is held to be common to all humans and derived from nature itself. You can argue that the Balanta or any African system predates and is superior to European law because, one, the source of authority. Argue that the Balanto or any indigenous African system is derived from the creator and the ancestors, making it self-evident and universal within their territory, meaning that if it comes from the creator and the ancestors and is not hidden in specialized books that only a quote unquote legal class has access to, which is why you pay an expensive retainer fee to a lawyer, because they have knowledge that in the European system, they have specialized knowledge that the rest of the public doesn't have. Because the legal system is not self-evident in the European system. In an African system, because it comes from nature, the creator, and the ancestors, it is available and self-evident. It is universal within that territory. Second, ritual as contract. This blew my mind. Every ritual, every initiation ceremony, every marriage, every harvest ritual is a legal contract between the individual, the community, and the spiritual world. Our legal system is not limited to just between one individual and another or an individual and the state. Our rituals were legal contracts. The ritual itself is the document. For example, I'll talk about marriage in a minute. Let me continue. Also, one principle of our legal systems is restorative justice. Unlike the punitive European system, indigenous African spirituality, which is a legal system, is a regulatory framework designed to maintain balance, ma'at, truth and reciprocity. When we enter into litigations, it's not about punishing the wrongdoer. It's about how do we restore truth and order in order to have peace in our society. That may involve some kind of punishment, but that is not the object of our legal system. Now watch this. We already talked about the Vatican, how they authorized this illegal total warfare and sent military vessels to invade our people to reduce them to perpetual servitude, which ended up with our ancestors coming to places like Tulsa and trying to rebuild. The argument here is that the Vatican and Portugal, which started this, and then all of the people that held the Asiento contract, did not just commit crimes, they performed a legal nullification of an existing sovereign system. First of all, the papal bulls, starting with Romanus Pontifex in 1452, Dum Diversas 1452, these documents claimed that the world was terra nullis, nobody's land, if not occupied by Christians. So if people were living there but they weren't Christians, their legal system says it's terra nullis. We must argue that this is a fraudulent legal claim based on our indigenous legal systems where we had contracts with the land. You know what those contracts were? They were the burial, the funeral rituals. When the body
There's a
returned.
question, Siphiwe.
Okay, go ahead. What's the question?
Where can we find this information?
It's at the top. Where?
What's the name, where do we go to?
She wanted to know where can you get the information that you're reading from.
I'm going to drop the link in the chat. I'll drop the link in the chat and I'll make sure you have it as well, Vanessa. Okay. And yeah, this is free. Everybody will have access to this. Okay. May I continue?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So, for example, every single one of our indigenous African ancestral groups had elaborate burial rituals because the body would return and be absorbed with the land. So those burial rituals were the legal contract between the community and the living earth that supported it. Therefore, when you had these foreigners, right, authorized by the Vatican, coming into what they called terra nullius, as if we didn't have legal contracts with the land, that's called a fraudulent legal claim, because the land was already under the jurisdiction of the indigenous natural law. This led to what's called jurisdictional usurpation. By kidnapping the Balanta or any other group, the Portuguese forcibly removed those kidnapped from their legal jurisdiction. This is a violation of the principle of forum non conveniens. Individuals were taken to a land where their laws were not recognized. Thus, we have what's called ethnocide, the destruction of your original God-given identities. You're not Americans. Your mother tongue is not English. You are not citizens of America. That was imposed upon you in the process of erasing who you actually are. So all your rituals, right, that were prohibited in the Americas was not just a form of religious intolerance. It was the illegal suspension of your indigenous constitutions. We didn't need to write on a piece of paper the laws because the rituals that we did with the entire community involved gave everybody a legal education and included them in the contracts naturally. So let me try to give an example. I think the marriage example is the best one. Let me see if I can find it. All right, here we go. For example, in our traditional African cultures, marriage requires the negotiation of bride price or a labor exchange between two distinct ancestral houses. This ritual establishes custody rights, inheritance lines, and mutual defense treaties between families. It functions as a public registry of kinship. Okay? So these marriage rights form an interlineage contract rather than a private romantic agreement. You see the difference? In the West, we have these romantic feelings. We look at the marriage more as this private romantic agreement. But in Africa, the marriage rights were this contract under our natural law system. Okay, so that's a good example that I like to use to try to start getting people to switch into this sovereign mindset. Let me give another example. We have in Balanta, we have an initiation ceremony. It's called Fanado. Almost every African group has this same age grade initiation system, which is not merely a rite of passage. They tell you, oh, this is just a rite of passage. But actually, it's the mandatory training for legal citizenship. For example, in Bolanta culture, as a man, if you do not complete the finado, you don't have legal standing to sit in the council of elders to decide important matters regarding the village. Okay? Only those who complete the finado are recognized as legal adults with standing to speak in council. It's the finado, the initiation ritual serves as a competency exam and an oath of confidentiality. It ensures that every citizen understands the statutes, the taboos, the things you cannot do, and the precedents, the ancestral history of the people. Now, when they came and kidnapped Bolanta children or other children from other groups during the slave trade, it was a denial of due process and an illegal prevention of licensing for communal leadership. This is some of the damage that was done to us as a result, but they never taught us these things. Okay. One other example, property law and land titles. When you go to Africa, you might hear about a sacred tree or an ancestral sign, and we relegate that to the area of mere religion, which means, it's just this one's group of belief. It doesn't carry the weight of law, of legal precedent. But watch this. In our property rights are established the first cleansing rituals and ancestral shrines. Land is not owned in the Western fee simple sense. It is held in trust for the ancestors. A ritual must be performed to mark the boundaries. These rituals serve as a deed of trust. The planting of certain trees or the placement of a shrine acts as a public notice of claim that is recognized by all neighbors. Everybody knows, just like you may have, in the Western sense, right, land titles and fences that mark borders and things like that. That was the function of our ritual sites and our rituals to clean certain pieces of land. They served as public notices of claims. Okay? The Portuguese and Vatican doctrine of discovery ignored these visible legal markers. So when we say, no, you cannot bulldoze that tree, right? It is part of our sacred, ritual territory. It's not just a matter of religion, it's a matter of indigenous jurisprudence. And by ignoring that, you commit title fraud. And they did this on a continental scale. So let me stop there for a minute, right? This is my introduction to understanding that law as you know it, being miseducated in the United States, means that if you don't make the sovereign mind switch, you will only think about and pursue legal remedies that fit your miseducated legal training. It's important that the reparations movement understands that you have always been a member of an African sovereign polity, and that has never stopped. And that the imposition of American jurisprudence is part of the crime. You have been removed from a jurisdiction. So inside your DNA, you have a legal jurisdiction that finds no expression in your lived reality. And that produces a harm, a psychological harm that we are now referring to as legal alienation. As African people in Tulsa who suffered horrendous war crimes when they destroyed Tulsa and Greenwood, all those things that our ancestors suffered, That is not a matter of domestic legal jurisdiction. It is a matter of your sovereign natural law jurisdiction that they've been preventing you from exercising. You are not going to get justice from within the domestic system. It is the national domestic system that you are actually fighting against. Your claim is against the very legal system itself. How are you going, where are you going to bring that claim if not a court that supersedes the domestic jurisdiction? This is why we keep losing. The United States has inherent built-in defenses for when you assert certain claims, because domestic law and international law are two different things. And until we learn the international law, we are handicapped. All right, let me stop there and see how people feel about what has just been presented. It's heavy. Any thoughts, comments, reactions, questions before I go on? I see a hand.
If I might, after centuries and centuries of indoctrination, how does one switch mindsets from something that you've never, in the present, have never known, but has always been there, right? But you've never known it. You're trained and trained and trained in this European domestic tradition, that you have to all of a sudden jump out of your own skin, if you will, to get to where you're talking about. I'm sorry, I'm not being very precise.
No, I understand you. It's very astute of you to ask that question. That's the most important question. How do you make the leap from the miseducated mindset to the sovereign mindset? Now, I can talk about how I did.
Okay.
Okay. So here I am at Yale University as Tony Blake, Anthony Nathaniel Blake. Now, when you look at me, do you see an Italian or Spanish person? When you look at me, Nathaniel, do I look Jewish or Hebrew to you? Not necessarily. My surname, Blake, is an English surname. Do I look English?
No, you don't look sus enough.
Okay. And I'm speaking the English language. So right then and there, as a Black person, an African who doesn't know, who I know for a fact, I'm not Spanish, I'm not Hebrew, and I'm not English. Right then and there, I have an identity crisis that provokes me to ask the question, who am I? When you start asking that question, who am I? How did I get here? Why do I speak this language that is not, I'm not English? Why do I have these names? Now you have to seek information. You have to seek the truth. You have to find out what happened. Where did I come from? And how did I get here? This is part of the process. Now, in addition to that process of trying to get that information, seeking it, asking the universe to give it to me, studying, reading, taking the African Ancestry DNA test. In addition to that, we know from neuroscience that we use about 10% of our conscious brain determines our behavior, and about 90% of our subconscious brain determines the rest. And that our subconscious programming, right, determines most of our behavior. So at this point, now you have to find out, how do I access my subconscious programming and change it? Okay. Now, The subconscious programming that we as Afro descendants receive is a programming, epigenetic programming that used violence and trauma. Everybody go back. How many people have seen Roots? All right. You know that scene where Kunta Kinte is being whipped until he breaks and accepts that his name is Toby, right? That is the collective experience of all Afro descendants. That trauma, that violence, that told us that we are now defined by our enslavers. Now, we learned through those 6, 7, 8 generations that in order to survive, we had to become subservient to white people. Don't look them in the eye. Okay? Do what they say. Resist the natural response of self-preservation and defend yourself. Okay? So we went through a manufacturing process where we were free human beings, and through the use of violence and terror in the slave manufacturing process in America, it took a human being and reduced them to a product called a chattel slave that had a trade name, Negro Black Slave. Those are trademarks of an intellectual property system that, just like, for example, if you take sugar and you cut it and you put it into a manufacturing, you use violence to break it apart, right? Squeeze out the juice, break the cellular membranes. Then you take that juice and you add to it other things, and then you get a product that doesn't exist in nature naturally called rum. You took something natural, you applied violence to it, you broke it apart, you added something, you have something that doesn't exist in nature. They took natural human genetic material in our ancestors, put it through a violent manufacturing process, and then resulted in a product, a thing that obeys white people to survive, whose DNA prompts them to be subservient, not to challenge. If you do, you will die. So epigenetically, that's the scientific term for how the environment encodes in our DNA primary behavior. Whatever we did to survive those 6, 7, 8 generations was prioritized in our DNA, because if we survived it, that if we face it again, this is what we should automatically default to because it's proven to help us survive. So when we are oppressed, when we are discriminated against, right, our genetic subconscious programming is to what? Turn the other cheek. Be subservient. Play within the rules. The rules set by who? Of course, in every generation, we had the Kunta Kintes that didn't. They fought back, they resisted. But those were the ones that were what? Killed and used as an example to further program us. So what we have to do to make that shift is we have to get into the subconscious. The way you get into the subconscious is through breathing and meditation. And once you get into a trance state, you have to engage in what's called NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, where new programming, while you're in that trance state, creates a new subconscious programming. For me, that happened in the Rastafari movement. In Rastafari, we have a form of neuro-linguistic programming called Nyabingi. We play drums. The drums are the patterns are scientifically created to send a vibration to affect the amygdala and the Abdullah oblongata, the primary brain. and to open up the heart chakra. The second drum is designed, right, to engage the neuro-linguistic programming. And then the third drum is designed to what we call attack. And so with the drumming, then we would sing chants. So for example, in the Nyabingi Rastafari chanting, one of the main themes is repatriation, that one day we would return from captivity back to our ancestral homelands. Now, in Rastafari, we would take the four elements of creation, okay? We would take the earth, the marijuana, the cannabis, okay? We would put the cannabis into a chalice, right, that has water. Then we would inhale through the chalice and apply fire. So we have earth, air, water, and fire. The smoke would then go through that water and go into the temple to induce the trance state. And then we would sing songs that talk about what? The judgment on Babylon, right? How when we are one with God, have no fear, right? With, you know, one with God can defeat an army of people. We're going to one day go home. There's going to be justice. So we would sing these songs while in this trance state, in an altered consciousness, which is exactly what we did in Africa, to remove the subconscious programming. This is why they had to outlaw these rituals in America, so that you wouldn't be able to what? Use these natural technologies to program yourself to behave the way you want to. Most of you, you've gone to church, you've had those moments where your eyes are closed, you're deep in prayer, the whole congregation starts singing, and you lose yourself. You go into a collective trance. Now, if when you do that, you belong to a church that teaches you that death has no power over you, right? That you have the power to defeat your enslavers, right? And that they will be judged by divine justice. And one day why do you think it is that I'm in my ancestral homeland now speaking my own language while you're there? It's because I went through several years of this neuro-linguistic programming for African liberation. Did that answer your question? It's a long process. It doesn't happen overnight. And there are technologies. The West tries to discredit these technologies, and they talk about voodoo, or they talk about, you know, demonic this, everything. But no, they are just technologies based on an understanding of how the human body, the temple, the brain works. Even the Christian tradition says we are created in the image and likeness of God. This is what separates us from animals. Animals cannot go beyond their original programming. A beaver cannot be more than a beaver. A beaver can only make rudimentary shelters. Beavers cannot make an airplane. A horse cannot go into outer space or make a cruise ship that can sail to the Bahamas. The thing that separates us from the animals is we have a divine nature. We share in God's omnipresence, omniscience, and omnipotence. Okay? So because we have this divine nature, we are gods, just in a small form, which means we have the power to create, meaning we have the power to program the machine that we live in. We are not our bodies. We are not our brains. We are a divine energy that simply lives inside. This is the real tragedy of our enslavement, because to deny our humanity is to literally deny the divine part of our humanity. It's literally, when we say it's a crime against humanity, it's literally a crime against the divine itself, because we are created in the image of the divine. If you teach us that we are nothing more than tools in a system to obey you, that is an offense against God. The way out of that, right, is to start seeking, start saying, wait a minute. Now that I know how I was brought to America or how my ancestors were brought to America and who brought them, I still don't know where I come from. What were my religious, legal jurisdictional concepts that are embedded in my DNA that are being suppressed, that prevent me from exercising my sovereign mindset? And how do I go into ritual trance to reprogram myself with that original knowledge and understanding? We have healers in our reparations community. This is where I met Vanessa. All the healers who kind of understood these things were called together to start answering the question, how are we going to take 250 million people in the Western Hemisphere through this process to heal them? So I don't know. Did I answer your question, or did I make it more difficult for you?
You answered it, I can hear the much more.
Okay.
Declare that they're sovereign citizens. And they're not governed by constitutional law. For example, we had people taking over the United States part of the Western United States. They were sovereign citizens. And they're doing this nutso stuff. I'm sorry.
Yeah. In the American context, when you hear this term sovereign citizen, you might default to white Americans who want to break from what they feel is a takeover of the original Constitution of the United States. Okay? It's a little bit different, but it begs the same question, meaning, whose Constitution? How did a Constitution created by Anglo-Saxons obtain jurisdiction over Afro-descendants? Is that natural? When and where did we consent to that? And when we learn our real history, that we have our own sovereign judicial systems, in law, this is called a conflict of laws. Which jurisdiction governs a dispute? In international law today, they've answered that question by saying the law where the original crime took place. So if the original crime took place when our ancestor was captured from their homeland in Africa, in my case, in Vanessa's case, in Cam's case, Balanta law governs the dispute. If you were taken as a Bamileke from Cameroon, Bamileke jurisdiction governs the case. But we're proceeding as if we have to bring the case under their jurisdiction, under their legal concepts, under their court system. We've already sacrificed legal territory, jurisdiction when we proceed this way, only because we don't know ourselves. I'm pioneering bringing the reparations movement from this sovereign perspective, African sovereign perspective, that is different from the white sovereign citizens movement, because we are reverting to a jurisdiction and a territory that predates America.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions, comments on that?
Yes.
I see another hand up.
My question, I'm trying to process this mentally, but for us, who come on later and have mixed DNA, how do you justify following the solvents of another, say of the Bantu people or the Cameroon, which is one of mine, when you're mixed with all these other components like Irish and European and on and on?
Spain.
Okay. I think I heard the question. I didn't hear some of it, but what I heard was, how do you justify this other sovereign system? Was that the gist of the question?
Yes, your solvent system.
If I was said I'm a Bantu, I'm a Bantu by 13%, and it might be say 23%, but I have all these other components.
Okay, so no, you are misunderstanding your genetic makeup. I'm glad you asked this question. This is where I have to go into genetic science. Okay. There are two kinds of DNA. There's your non-recombinant DNA, non-combining. This is the DNA that never changes. It is passed from mother to daughter to daughter to daughter to daughter, and it's passed from sons to sons to sons to sons. It never changes. The other DNA is called your autosomal DNA. This is the DNA that changes from generation to generation. This explains why you might have the nose of your grandmother, but your brother doesn't. This is why you may have the eyes and ears of your ancestor, but your sibling doesn't. Two different DNAs. There are two different DNA tests. When you take the African Ancestry DNA test, it is the only test that identifies your non-recombinant DNA. That will tell you who your mother was, and who your father was. This is why I can say my maternal ancestry is Yoruba from Nigeria, and my paternal ancestry is Balanta from Guinea-Bissau. That is what we call your root lineage. That tells you who you are. Think of it as a Christmas tree. You had an ancestor, either a maternal ancestor or a paternal ancestor, or both, that survived the Middle Passage. They came from one specific family and community, not a whole bunch of different places in Africa. No, they spoke a language, in my case, Balanta. That other DNA test that tells you you're 13% from this place and 12% from that place, that doesn't tell you who you are or where you came from. That tells you how many different ornaments were placed on your Christmas tree. How much other stuff came into your root lineage. So if I were to ask you, who can tell you, or what tells you the history of the Christmas tree? Is it the tree that witnessed all the ornaments being placed on it throughout the years? Or is it the gingerbread that came in year 5? So if you don't know your maternal or paternal ancestral lineage, you don't know your place in the world. To know that you are 13% from this area, from Senegambia, and 12% from Central Africa is not it. Your jurisdiction comes from, think of that ancestor that was boarded on this ship. Where did they embark? Where were they captured from? That's your jurisdiction, and that's your mother tongue. That's what you assert in international law, because you are a member of that jurisdiction. Under the Geneva Convention, you were taken as a civilian prisoner of war, and you've been living in captivity ever since. This is why you don't speak your mother tongue. Under the Geneva Convention, you have the right to either return, which is why you need to take the African Ancestry test, because you can't make the claim until you know where you came from, or your final release. The final release is to be negotiated. This is what the city of Tulsa needs to be doing. Final release for the city of Tulsa, the Black residents of Tulsa, would be a complete autonomous community, governed by itself, conducting a plebiscite and asking, what relationship do we want with the state of Oklahoma in the United States government, to be decided by plebiscite. And to demand reparations in various forms, right, for the poisonous fruit, that handout I gave you. Okay, this is why this is so important. We haven't been arguing this in our court battles. Okay, the Black Tulsa community needs to argue, right, that as a result of ethnocide and the same simultaneous process of ethnogenesis, when they destroyed your original identity, it was replaced through a process of ethnogenesis, the creation of a new ethnicity, what we call African American, or I call New African or Afro descendants, because we lived in this territory for over 300 years, and we have this heritage that made us into a different people. What do I mean by this? The white residents of Tulsa and the Black residents of Tulsa for 300 years had experiences that were internalized and received differently. So it is not correct to say that because we occupied the same space at the same time, that we are all Americans. No. Black people in Tulsa experience those same things differently than the white folks. This explains the health gap. This explains the wealth gap. This explains the double consciousness. This explains everything. And so now the argument must be, once you understand the root, the origin, how this started, the war, the captivity. During the war, there were various times of what? Détente and escalation. At one point, the United States, or the white citizens of Tulsa, escalated the war when they did all that damage to your community. That was an escalation of the war. Like right now, what's going on in the world, right? There are periods where missiles are flying, and then there are periods where the missiles are calm. They're not flying. Then something happens, then the missiles start flying again. This is what has happened to us ever since our ancestors were brought to America. The war never stopped. It's just various periods of escalation. I'll give you another example. So in the 1960s, when we got frustrated with the civil rights, that we were nonviolently, peacefully asserting justice, and they were burning our children in churches and putting dogs on our children in water holes. And we were like, these people have no moral conscience. We're not violent. We're doing it non-violently, peacefully. When that didn't work, we on our side escalated our tactics. You had Black Panther Party, you had the New African Independence Movement, and the United States in turn escalated their tactics. They fabricated a war on drugs, invaded our communities. People were murdered. Fred Hampton, for example, people were imprisoned. It was an escalation. Once you understand the origin as warfare, you will understand all of our history in a different way, because it's a conflict between sovereign nationals. You have lost that sovereign consciousness, but it can be regained. And when you regain it, the way you struggle is completely different. Another hand, question.
Question I have about the DNA, the African ancestry DNA. I have 5 siblings, and my mother died, but my dad is alive. Should I do my DNA or should I do my dad? Since he's alive, I do mine.
Great question. Great question. So the way the DNA gets passed down, if you're a woman, you can take the maternal test to find out your maternal DNA. If you want to find out your paternal DNA, you have to have a brother or an uncle on your father's side take that test.
Oh, what? He's dead.
Also paternal?
Yes.
That's what I could do.
maternal,
Yes.
woman, yes,
Can you just one time?
yes.
I got it.
Now, they're about $300. The man, however, can take both tests.
Yeah.
Yes.
Carries both. Only, the woman can only take the maternal, because it's only from mother to daughter to daughter to daughter to daughter.
And here's the reason why. A man has an X chromosome from his mother and a Y chromosome from his father. That's why the man can take the maternal and paternal and find out both.
Man,
But a woman doesn't inherit the Y chromosome from her father. A woman gets the X chromosome from her father's mother. That's why a woman cannot take the paternal test. She has to have a brother or an uncle take it.
and that's what I did. For my parents. And I had my dad take both. I could have got his sister, my aunt.
That's $600 to take both?
Yeah.
They're $300 each.
Okay,
So I did both
Take
on
the
both
B&M,
sides. I
Take the
did both.
B&M, 600?
Say what now?
If you take the maternal and the paternal, 600?
Correct, that's to take both.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
So my question is, what did, my father is deceased, so I have a half brother. So how would that be complex of a half brother?
Y'all say half, you gotta say that.
And we're gonna say that.
Within a school.
That's cool.
Yes. Y'all got the same dad?
That's cool, that's not half.
Yeah, if you can take the paternal. Because y'all share the same mom.
So I can get it from.
Yeah, correct. On the paternal side.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, can you talk about the legislation you wrote for Illinois?
Yes, thank you. How many people heard of Illinois HR 292? Anybody hear of this? All right.
Anybody heard of
So,
that?
Representative Carol Ammons from Champaign-Urbana, Illinois, reached out to me, and we worked and successfully got passed legislation that has now been funded and has been implemented, that any Black resident of the state of Illinois can get free DNA testing. That the state provides this DNA testing for any Black resident who wants it. This is what every state should be doing.
I'm gonna try though. He sent me the legislation already.
Yes. And this is what we are bringing to the Vatican.
Yes.
To say, look, the most valuable thing that you took from us, that you destroyed from us, was our ancestral lineage. Through the miracle of this African ancestry DNA testing, for the first time in all of human history, we can recover from state-sanctioned ethnocide. We are the only group of people that suffered this for 6, 7, 8 generations and can now recover. And so because we now have the proof and the documents that the Vatican authorized this, contracted it to each nation state, and was the single largest profiteer of the unjust enrichment, it should be the Vatican that pays for the testing. That is the just and right thing to do. It's not about writing a check. That comes later. But the first thing is, for any person who wants to repair from this war damage and know who they come from in Africa, to start to be able to regain their original God-given divine jurisdiction before the crime, it should be made available by those that are responsible for the crime.
We have to tell Henry Gates.
How long did it take for Illinois?
How long did it take for the legislation in Illinois to pass?
Less than a year, through the great work of Carol Ammons.
As soon as he proposed it and gave the language, she took it.
You can doing that today, then.
I put Regina and Stewart, but, you know, we'll see, all we can do is try.
That's it. I'm here for you.
That's
You get our signature now.
If
We're all saying.
the Catholic Church got no money, I don't know, the Catholic Church don't.
We're all saying right
Everything.
now. Pray about it, saying.
Can you talk about, a little bit about your, repatriation?
Yes. So I took the African ancestry test in 2009 and discovered that I am a Balanta descendant on my paternal side, my father's side. I had never heard of Balanta. I had never heard of the country of Guinea-Bissau. And from 2009 to 2016, so 6 years, I didn't do much with the test results. In 2016, something happened where I became really interested in my Balanta ancestry. And I started doing as much research as I could. Unfortunately, there wasn't a lot of information because Balanta is a people, they never had chiefs or leaders or kings, so they never established a state structure. And because of Western academic bias, if you're an African, if you didn't develop a chief or a king or a state structure, you're uncivilized. Even though I just showed you, we had our own rituals and our own society and jurisprudence. And because we never had a chief leader or king, we were an egalitarian horizontal society. We don't have subservience in our DNA. The highest political unit is the head of the household. All right, so I got intrigued with these things and I started studying as much as I could, but most of the information was in Portuguese because Guinea-Bissau was colonized by the Portuguese. So I had to invest in doing a lot of translation work as well. In that process, I ended up writing a 3-volume history of the Balanta people that I completed in 2017. And by 2019, I made my first visit to Guinea-Bissau. Phenomenal journey. And at that time, I was still competing as a world-class swimmer. And the Minister of Sport asked me if I wanted to represent Guinea-Bissau in the Tokyo Olympics in 2020. And I was like, that would be the greatest honor I could possibly ever have. So in order for that to happen, I had to become a citizen. So the Minister of Justice did a review of the law and realized they could grant me citizenship and waive all of the requirements that you normally have to go through in a naturalization process, including waiving all the fees. And that's what they did, right? So I got my citizenship based on a decree that said, on the one hand, because DNA testing showed that I am a Balanta descendant, and 2, so that I could represent the country in international swimming competitions, they were giving me my citizenship. I set a precedent. That's important because now they have a precedent. If you can show that you are a descendant of a Guinean, not just Balanta, Fula, Jola, Biafada, Mandinka, any of the tribes, there's now a legal precedent. They can give you citizenship and waive all the requirements. So I came to Guinea-Bissau, and by this time I was fed up with my life in the United States. The indignity. Even though I was successful, I owned my own business. I had developed a kind of fame. I was featured in Sports Illustrated. I had been on Good Morning America. You know, I had my own business. I was making 6 figures. I was happily married, had a family. But I remember telling my sons, we lived in Springfield, Missouri, which was 97% white. And I remember telling my sons in the summer, when they go to the public pool, this was right after a young white person went to the Walmart about 1,500 meters from our house with a bulletproof vest, grenades, machine guns, and walked into the Walmart where we shop almost every other day. And I remember telling my sons that at that time were age 9 and 5, that if anything happened at the public pool, to not be afraid that in Balanta culture, right, there's no such thing as death, right? The ancestors live in another place. And if somebody needs help, right, it's your responsibility to help them, even if there's gunfire. Do not be afraid of death. And if you get shot, you're going to join your ancestors. There's going to be a big party and they're going to receive you, right? Somebody has to be the hero. Somebody has to have courage to protect the innocent people, and it's you. I remember telling my sons that. This is Balanta culture. But I didn't want to continue living with that. I had plenty of experiences. I had been in the George Floyd position twice in my life with a gun to my head and a knee on my neck. Twice. And survived it. I got to the point where, as my consciousness was growing, I felt a premonition that one day they were going to violate my rights, and I was not going to be subservient, and it could cost me my life. And that's when I decided I had to leave. I moved to Guinea-Bissau in 2020 to train for the Olympics and never returned to the United States. And in doing that, I initiated a Decade of Return program where anybody that takes the African Ancestry test, most of the time we do 3 tours each year. You can come to Guinea-Bissau. We reconnect you with, if you're Balanta, with Balanta, if you're Fula, with Fula, if you're Jola, with Jola. We reconnect you with villages according to your ancestry. And we now have a citizenship program. We've got 30 citizenships since 2023. Recently, my Balanta sister, Nanba, who some of you may know as Robin Rue, right, who was the councilwoman or whatever they call it in Evanston, that got the Evanston, Illinois reparations, the first municipal reparations. She's Balanta. She came, she got her citizenship, recently got her passport. Brother Cam Howard is also Balanta. He was here. They both came in 2021 to help me launch the Decade of Return program. And this is being replicated in other countries, Sierra Leone, Cameroon, Burkina Faso, other countries. Benin just passed a law. They have the best citizenship law. You don't even have to be of Benin, descent. Any African American, right, can go through this process. It takes 3 months. It's $100, and you get your citizenship. So this is a lot of people are for the first time seriously considering returning to Africa in some capacity because they become disillusioned with life in the United States. It's your right. It's one of 4 options. And reparations should cover not only the transportation costs, but your reintegration costs for 25 years. This is what we are trying to negotiate through the African Union, its Committee of Experts on Reparations, its legal reference group. When they finally sit at the table to negotiate, this is one of the central pillars of negotiation. That if you and your family decide you want to leave the United States, you should be granted citizenship, have your transportation covered, have a unique immigration status with programs and preferential treatment that help you reintegrate for the next 25 years. This is part of what satisfaction, restitution, all of these things in the definition of reparations is all about, that don't normally get talked about in the reparations movement in the United States at the local and national level, because most of what is talked about is what? Getting more more scholarships. Most of what is talked about are remedies that help you what? Further assimilate and integrate into America. They don't talk about the remedies that are needed for the other 3 options.
What about your immediate, is it just for your immediate family or your cousins or, just immediate family or what? To come over there and bring, if you be a citizen of, it's your family, you said you can bring your family over there, right? Is it your immediate family or your, anybody?
Okay, so if I understand the question, it's a little hard to hear. If I understand the question was, is this for your immediate family?
Yes.
Is that the question?
Yes.
All right. So the question is, for anyone over the age of 18 to whom have the right of return.
DNA?
And if you are over the age of 18 and you have minors, then yes, that it would include the minors to whom you are responsible for. All of your adult members in your family can make the choice for themselves.
Okay. Is for Ghana too? Anywhere in Africa? Ghana?
Other countries are doing similar programs, yeah.
Yes, so right now, this citizenship movement, this right of return movement, has reached a stage where there are a handful of countries that have programs. Guinea-Bissau has its program. Sierra Leone has its program. Ghana has its program. Benin has its program. Those are the major programs. They each differ. What we are attempting to do is to get a uniform program implemented by all members of the African Union, all 54 nation states. Okay? This is a process that has been ongoing since 2003, when the African Union amended its constitution and included the African diaspora as its sixth region. I happen to have been the only African American in the room at the African Union when they did it, which explains why I do what I do. But it's a process. So it's taken us 20 years to get to this point, and we don't know how much longer it's going to take before we get to a uniform process where everybody can get the testing for free, like Illinois, and you can decide whether you want to go to your maternal country, your paternal country, or somewhere else in Africa. We're trying to make that a reality for our children.
What is your phone number?
Out of here.
I want to ask you, how do you feel going back home?
What if your
I'm going
family
home.
is?
How do you feel?
There's a question, how do you feel going back to your homeland?
Good.
Okay, give me 1 second. I'm dropping my information in the chat. You have it. You have it. But they don't have it. But Vanessa, you have it. You can make it available to them. I answer my phone. I help everybody. All right. So how do I feel about returning to this? Is a question whose answer has many layers to it. First of all, there's a profound sense of achievement. If you think about your ancestor who was put on that ship and survived 6 months across the Atlantic, what was their prayer every single day? Their prayer was what?
Go back home.
To go back home.
My grandfather came over on the boat, and as a
Okay.
child,
So, knowing that I have fulfilled the prayer of Brasa and Chabra, my great, 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 great grandfather, 5 greats, who was captured as an 8-year-old child from the village of Nunche and trafficked to Charleston, South Carolina, where he was bought by the Blake family and enslaved. The Blake family are descendants of Sir Robert Admiral Blake, who was the commander of the British Navy, right, under Oliver Cromwell. To know that I fulfilled that prayer, performed the ritual that allowed his soul to finally be at peace after 257 years. Nobody can take that away from me and explain the meaning of that to me. On the other hand, my ancestral homeland of Guinea-Bissau is a broken, failed state. It is currently being ruled by an illegal military high command, violating the human rights of every single Guinean citizen, including myself. That is not a fun situation to be in. But I didn't come to Guinea-Bissau as an opportunist looking for the best retirement opportunity for me. I came to Guinea-Bissau because I felt I had an ancestral calling to join my Balanta people and my fellow Guineans in improving the quality of life in our ancestral homeland. And I know I have something to offer. So I came here on an ancestral spiritual mission that regardless of the conditions, no matter how bad or how good it gets, I'm going to live and die here. Because this is the only place on earth that I can legitimately call my own. Now, I also served as the Minister of Foreign Affairs for the Provisional Government of the Republic of New Africa, meaning I am part of those people who feel like we've been in America long enough, we built it, and we have a right under the Geneva Convention and under the Lincoln administration to build self-governing colonies that develop into independent nation states of their own, right there on land claimed by the United States. We call this the six-state Black Belt territory from Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina, which is where the vast majority of our people have lived throughout the 6 generations. That we have a right to set up self-governing territory and to become an independent nation. So for those people who don't want to repatriate like I have, I fight for their right to exercise self-determination, which is protected under international law. There have been 114 ethno-plebiscites since World War II. They have established 90 new nations. Don't think that the idea that America is going to cede land and allow a new nation to develop is a crazy idea. That has happened 90 times since World War II. Most new nations started, right, as territory that belonged to another sovereign power. What has to happen is we have to create the conditions where it costs more for the United States to deny our right to self-determination than to recognize it. But that's another conversation. Yeah. But the answer to the question is, not only did I return to Guinea-Bissau, and I have returned to the land that was taken from me, I'm learning my language. Not only that, I married a Balanta woman. Not only that, because I was the pioneer, because this was not my doing, it was God and the ancestors, my reward was, not only did I marry a Balanta woman, I married the Balanta princess, the daughter of the former president of the country. Now, think about this. There has been one Balanta president of Guinea-Bissau. Balanta is the largest ethnic group in Guinea-Bissau. There's only been one. He's considered the national hero of the country. I am the leader of the Balantas outside of Guinea-Bissau. I am the one that set up the organization, started calling everyone, and built this program. Think about this. I have returned, and out of all the women in Guinea-Bissau, I marry the daughter of the hero of Guinea. You can't write this. I mean, you can't make a better story than this. So when you ask me, how do I feel about returning to my homeland? You would have to know my story. And it's so deep and profound. There is great joy and triumph, and there's great heartbreaks. I was sabotaged by my own National Olympic Committee when I landed in Tokyo to represent Guinea-Bissau at the Olympics. My own Guinea-Bissau National Olympic Committee revoked my Olympic accreditations, and I was detained for 6 days in the airport and didn't compete by my own Guinean brothers. There has been so much joy and simultaneous heartbreak. But I have absolutely no regrets. Martin Delaney talked about this. He brought 15 people to Africa. I have doubled the number of people that I've brought back to Africa. So I am now in the class with Martin Delaney. Marcus Garvey talked about this, but he never got citizenship for people. I've been able to, so I am very proud of what I've been able to accomplish, even though my country is the 4th poorest in Africa. And we are suffering greatly right now.
Where are your boys at?
My boys are still in Springfield, Missouri with their mother.
Someone asked about Moorish DNA.
Okay. That's a general question. Did they have a more, I can answer this, but if they had a more specific question about it?
Anybody who asked?
Okay, so what if you researched and your family was not from lost nation, but there were actually just Moorish explorers that decided to stay because they intertwined with humans?
Vanessa, can you repeat that?
Come down, so get closer to the mic or speak up.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't hear it.
I want to know.
I'll get it. I have it. Here she comes. Hold on just a second.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So, research, your family does not have slavery line, you don't find any records, but you find out they're more Moorish. Moorish were explorers. How does that work?
Okay, so great question. Thank you for asking that. So my legal passport says Siphiwe Baleka, Siphiwe Ka Baleka Bay-El. So you know Bay-El comes out of the Moorish tradition. That's how my legal, all right. So I'm well familiar with all things taught by Moorish, Science Temple, all those things. Now, the vast majority of people who claim a Moorish heritage don't really know if they are genetically descendant from Moors. What happened is because of our ethnocide and the destruction of our actual identities, throughout our history, we have claimed fictitious identities, whether it be Moorish, Hebrew Israelite, Rastafari, Ethiopianism, right? We did this because of the need to fill that void of truth. Who are we? And those fictitious identities served us. Yes, it's true that Moors have a sovereign relationship with the United States. And this was attractive to many Black people. When they learned of this, they saw this as an escape out of Jim Crowism, out of a second-class citizenship. So many people claim a Moorish identity for this reason, because it gives them a legal juridical advantage because there are treaties. But the real question is, are you actually descendant? Is your maternal line Moorish or your paternal? Most families will not be able to answer that question unless they take the African Ancestry DNA test, which will actually, some results will come back and say, you are of Moorish, right, lineage, okay? Now, if you get a result that says your ancestry, your DNA is Moorish, that means immediately you can invoke Moorish sovereign treaties and you can prove that they apply to you. But if you cannot show that you actually are descendant from Moors, you're claiming a fictitious jurisdiction that you might not be able to say applies to you, or you might not be able to defend in court. what every person should do in order to establish their legal standing is take the African ancestry test. That's the only way you can know for sure. Moorish people have their own claims. Now, understand the Moorish claims are complicated. The Moors were some of the biggest slave traders. The Moors went into the land of Guinea to try to enslave my ancestors. Can you imagine me not knowing my actual Balanta identity, being presented with Moorish information? It's attractive to me, and now I go around talking about I'm a Moor, right? And my ancestors are rolling in their grave saying, no, these are the people that fought wars and tried to enslave us. This is the problem when you don't actually know who you are. Can you imagine? I go around talking about Mansa Musa and how great he was, the leader of the Mali Empire. And the Mali Empire, when my people were living in the south of that region, tried to enslave us. And they would raid our villages, take our cattle, and then our Balanta warrior class would then go to the Mandinka of the Mali Empire and go retrieve our cattle. It was a form of reparations. Those cattle belonged to us. If they got caught, their hands would get cut off. So what I'm saying is, right, until you know your history, be careful about what you're claiming because you don't know how your ancestors feel about that. The Moors, when the Portuguese first arrived, the first 10 people that they captured included 3 Moors. Those 3 Moors were carrying a black woman, a Guinean woman that they had enslaved. One of those Moors was of a noble class. When he finally communicated, he said to them, listen, right, I'm aristocracy. If you let me go, I'll give you 10 of these Guineans, these black people. So we have to be careful about what we're claiming. The Moors have some good things about their history, but they also were part of those that enslaved us. This is why the main priority in order to restore Ma'at, balance on planet Earth, is we got to restore the truth. Who are we? All the other reparations we talk about come after that. Did that answer your question about the Moorish claims and what if you're Moor and how does that work? Did I answer the question?
Yes, 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 yes. All right,
Okay.
we gotta wrap it up. I know, right? We got 2 more speakers, and so. Yes.
Ancestry test and a patriarch ancestry test. Which one gives you the most information? The matriarch from the boys and from the girls?
Okay, if I heard the question correctly, which one did I get more information on, my maternal side or my paternal side?
Yeah, maternal.
So the Yoruba people are well known and well studied. There's even a sovereign Yoruba village called Olatunji Village in the South Carolina. So I had lots of information about Yoruba culture, Yoruba religion, even before I took the DNA test. And afterwards, I can get lots of information. But there was very little information about Balanta. I had to dig and invest. It was very difficult. For me, the Balanta stuff resonated a lot more than the Yoruba stuff. I wasn't really into Yoruba is a complete different. They have a hierarchical society. They have a plurality of gods. None of that resonated with me. So when you take a maternal and paternal test, remember, this is unprecedented in history. How you use the information, how you go about reclaiming your identity and your connection with your ancestors, there's no right or wrong answer. It's what works for you. If you want to spend equal time with both or all of what you find, that's great. If you want to jump 100% into just one because for some reason you feel that calling, that's great. We get to write the history of how these journeys take place. There's no right or wrong answer. It's a journey, a spiritual journey, unprecedented in human history.
Gotcha. All right. All right, Siphiwe, thank you so much. We'll be in touch.
Thank you. All right,
And you said it's okay to share your
absolutely.
okay, because he's
My
on
WhatsApp and email, yes.
I call him on WhatsApp when I need him and text him. WhatsApp is the way to go. So if you don't have a WhatsApp account, get one. But I'll share that information. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
All right,
All right, brother. God bless.
God bless.